We've talked your ears off about the biggest free agents on the market, but what about some guys that are flying under the radar? Let's talk about some of them on today's episode of Locked On Mariners. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Thursday, November 30th, 2023. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnett for the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. So we have talked a lot about Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto and pretty much all of the big name free agents to varying degrees for the Mariners. But today we're going to dive deeper into the barrel and look at some under the radar free agents Seattle could target. So Colby, I've got some names. You've got some names. We might have some of the same names. Who knows? But who's the first free agent you like to highlight today?
I have no names. I was counting on you to carry the load here.
Okay.
But
as always.
Sure. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so one name that I think we've talked about a little bit here, and it's a name that you like, but we don't know if he's actually going to play this year. It's kind of up in the air, but is Brandon Belt on your list? I assume
Brandon Belt's on my list, yeah.
All right, so you go ahead, you talk about Brandon Belt, because that's more your guy than it is mine.
Yeah, so like you said, there's been some chatter about him retiring, but he hasn't announced anything yet. We haven't heard anything about that. I feel like if he was going to retire, it would have been by now. Mariners had quite a bit of interest last winter. We know that they love to circle back on guys. Talked about this in the past. We've talked about Brandon Belt on this show. We've talked about him pretty extensively on the Patreon show as well. He makes sense for a full-time DH and also a Ty France hedge. Lefty bat that profiles well for T-Mobile Park. The big thing here, right, is like he struck out 34% of the time this past year. However, he did balance that out with a 15% walk rate. And what do we say about strikeouts? That you can strike out. You can strike out a lot as long as you're producing in other areas. Brandon Belt produced in other areas. He walked a lot. He did hit for power, not just over the wall power. That's not really a huge part of his game. It's more doubles than home runs for Belt. But I think he posted like a 130 something WRC plus. I don't care how much you're striking out if you're posting a 130, plus WRC plus. So really like the Brandon Belt idea. I just don't know if he's available. I don't know if he's going to play this year or not.
I do think he makes some sense for Seattle. Like he would have interest in Seattle if, he was interested in playing. It's a ballpark that fits his swing pretty well. Yep. Power should play plenty. He could play first base. He could also DH. He's stood in left field a couple times in his career. So I guess in an emergency, you could do that. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things like, is the strikeout rate indicative of this new, power swing that he's trying late in his career, or is it more indicative of a guy whose bat has slowed down significantly and he's 36 years old and the cliff is here? Kind of tough to say, but I think it's worth a shot, and it's a 1-year deal. It's probably, I don't know, what do you think, like 13, 14 million bucks
at
max?
most. Yeah.
So you got anybody on your list?
Yeah, I mostly have hitters. I have a couple of pitchers, but they're like guys that are either currently hurt or there's some injury concerns there. So
can I try to steal another name off your list real fast?
Sure. Let's see if you're able to.
Donovan Solano.
No, I forgot about Donovan Solano. Actually,
okay.
That's good. That's a good pull.
So Solano is kind of an interesting guy. He's a guy who's always signed in like January or February. Usually gets $1 million, $2 million bucks. He is on the older side. He is 35 years old. Played for the Twins last year, but is a really good hitter. Not much left defensively, but he did play first, second, and third last year. Not very well. He is now your traditional DH because there's not a ton of over the wall power. But when you look at what Solano has done throughout his career, like the dude just hits. The last 5 years. The last 5 years of his career.
It blows my mind. it blows my mind that like he hasn't gotten a fairly significant deal ever. I don't get what the issue is here. Like he posts. What
Yeah.
else do you want? I know
Yeah.
it's not
So,
sexy the way that he does it, but he posts. He hits for high average. He gets on base. Like, what else do you want?
I mean, like he's never gotten more than 450 plate appearances in his career in a single season, and that's this year.
Yeah.
So obviously the league has kind of gotten together and decided like this guy's not an everyday player. But
Sure.
since 2019, listen to these batting averages since 2019: 330, 326, 280, 284, 282. On base percentages of 360, 365, 344, 339, 369. And then the slug has dipped pretty significantly over the last 3 years. It's gone from 404 to 385 to 391. So about a 400 slug, a lot of doubles, not a ton of home runs. He is not your traditional DH. He is definitely more of a bat first utility guy. But if you want to talk about a guy who, he puts the ball in play fairly regularly, about league average strikeout and walk rates. So he's not a big strikeout guy. He actually has a really good like his sweet spot percentage, 99th percentile.
Yeah.
He uses the whole field. Like he's a pretty high the spray chart is well distributed. He's a pretty high likelihood guy to hit at least 270, put the ball in play, hit some doubles, hit some line drives. 65th percentile on hard hit percentage. It's not like he's a punch and Judy hitter. He can put some backspin on the ball. He'll hit some doubles and all that stuff, but he is a high average, high on base guy who, even at 35 years old, still put up a 282 batting average last year and a 360 on base.
Yep.
He's basically what you're hoping Ty France can be next year, but you'd hope France has a little bit more power. So you want to protect yourself at first base a little. You want to protect yourself at third base, at second base. Solano's a guy, and he's probably going to post, at least league average OBP or league average WRC pluses with probably well above league average batting average and on base percentages.
Yeah, I'm a big Donovan Solano fan. And if you're able
probably
to
get him for like $3 million.
Yeah, and that to me, in my mind, significantly boosts your depth.
One other thing I wanted to point out about Solano though.
Okay.
Not a splits guy. Hits lefties and righties fine.
Yep.
So if you need him to play every day, he can. Ideally, he's 2-3 times a week, but if France gets hurt or Rojas gets hurt or whatever, doesn't matter. You don't need a platoon partner with him. He's fine.
All right, we're going to talk more about some of these under the radar free agents in just a moment. But first, a reminder: this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and a whole lot more. And the Mariners might not be playing right now, but the Kraken and Seahawks are. So whether the action is on turf or on the ice, whether it's Jared McCann or Geno Smith, you can bet on it all with FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's LOCKDON and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. And as a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So before we get back into our under the radar free agent target breakdown, question of the day: what is the best major league ballpark outside of T-Mobile Park? Very simple question. For me, it's PNC
I've only
Park.
ever been to T-Mobile.
Right. I mean, it's just I've never been to PNC Park, but that's my favorite.
Yeah,
outside of
that's definitely
T-Mobile.
up there.
Yeah.
Target Field, it's got to be way up there.
No.
Love Target Field. Yeah, I think those two probably my favorite. Just aesthetically. But obviously never seen a game there, so I can't give you the ins and outs, but I think those two ballparks are great. And then I like Camden Yards a lot more before they messed up left field. I'll just leave it at that. God, that's so
That
ugly.
is
Doesn't even look
uh,
good.
yeah, the left field fence that they've
Ruined
installed
the
there
whole
is
aesthetic.
it is disgusting. It is disgraceful. Yeah. All right, so we're breaking down some under the radar free agent targets for the Mariners.
Oh, you know
Let
what?
us know your answer to the question of the day down below or in the live chat if you're watching the premiere of this
Mhm.
on YouTube. What were you going to say, Coley?
I'll interrupt you again. I actually have been to another major league stadium. I went to the World Baseball Classic game between the U.S.
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
Canada
yeah, yeah, yeah,
at
you did.
Chase
Yeah,
Field in March, and that place is a dump. So the Diamondbacks may have
yeah.
gone to the World Series, but at least your ballpark is significantly better than that parking garage that they call a ballpark. So
It's not very aesthetically
it
pleasing
doesn't look
on
good on
TV,
TV
and
either.
I
Yeah,
can't imagine
no.
that translates to real life that well either.
It
Yeah,
looks like the
that's
grass is painted onto concrete. Like, the
yeah,
outfield
that's
does not look lush at all. To be fair,
it's
it was
very
only March. So,
very similar to how I view the Rogers Center here in Toronto. For those that don't
yeah.
know, I live in Toronto because apparently
Mhm.
a lot of people still think that I live in Seattle. But I live in Toronto. I go to quite a few Blue Jays games over the course of the year. That ballpark, you don't feel like you're in a ballpark. It does not have the ballpark feel to it. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, in terms of just all ballparks, even ones that I haven't gone to, PNC Park is pretty cool. Really like that one.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, getting back into these under the radar free agent targets for the Mariners. Justin Turner.
Mm.
Justin Turner makes a lot of sense to me, and he's someone that I don't see too many people talking about with regards to the Mariners. He's 39. All right, so let's just get that out of the way. Obvious risk here, but he keeps hitting. I think he was 276. Here, let me just look it up real quick. Yeah, 276, 345, 455 this past year.
Mhm.
Crushed lefties, 142 WRC plus against lefties. He hit righties just fine, 105 WRC plus. The Mariners, same thing as with Belt, right? The Mariners should be very open to a full time DH, and Turner would be a pretty solid fit. He brings a veteran presence for those that
Mhm.
care about that stuff. Obviously, championship round, and also has a connection to Brant Brown, who we still don't know what his title is in Seattle, but he's a Mariner. He's a Mariner
Sure.
coach? Question mark. I don't know,
Let's
but
call it that for now.
yeah, but
He is a hitting instructor.
obviously has a connection with Justin Turner from their
Mhm.
championship days down in LA. Who's next on your list?
Okay. I assume at some point we'll have some more crossover. So let's head to the outfield real
Mhm.
fast here. A name that I bring up a lot is kind of like a second tier offensive player that a lot of people always scoff at. But Adam Duvall, I think, makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense for Seattle. Yes, he strikes out. Okay, like let's just start there. Yes, he strikes out.
Doesn't get on base that much either.
I mean, it's slightly below league average. It's
Yep.
315 the last 2 years, so not ideal. But hey, if you like Lourdes Gurriel, meet Adam Duvall, who's going to be significantly cheaper, and I have less concerns about the power playing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Uh, he's also still capable of playing center field. You don't want him to be your everyday guy out there, but he's more than capable of handling that spot in spot starts when you need him. Last year, he hit 247, 303, 531, 116 WRC plus. It's a little Teoscar Hernandez like, but it is a guy who can actually give you value defensively, who has a similar bat to Teoscar, who's also not going to cost you Eric Swanson and then
Right.
$20 million. Like
Right.
Duvall is an eight to $10 million player who can play every day if you need him to, can be a role player, a bench guy if you need him to.
Yep.
The power will play just fine at T-Mobile.
Yep.
And again, he gives you defensive value. It's solid center field defense. It's not great. And he's also graded out really well as a base runner. So it's still a good athlete at 35. I understand some concerns here that maybe he's AJ Pollock. Like, okay, that's fair. But
Yeah.
I mean, when you signed Pollock, he was coming off of a bad year. And right now, Duvall is not coming off a bad year. He's coming off a pretty solid year. But if I understand why a lot of fans aren't too excited about that idea, but I do think it makes some sense. Duvall's he was a 2-1 player last year and only 353 plate appearances. So
Yeah.
still some value
Again,
there.
these are under the radar targets. We're
Sure.
trying to think outside the box. These are guys that are probably not going to be better than 2 wins at most in 2024, but they help.
Right.
Right?
I mean,
They help pad out your roster.
yeah, nobody on this list is the guy we want to be the big addition.
No,
This winter.
they're the second or third or even
Yeah.
fourth guy that you get. So yeah. Mitch Garver. I'm surprised you haven't mentioned him yet. He's probably the biggest name.
Yeah, I was wondering if he qualified as under the radar or not.
Right.
But
I don't see too many people talking about Mitch Garver though. I really don't.
okay.
I feel like he's kind of been, because I mean, like I see a lot of people talking about Soler. I see a lot of people talking about Candelario. I see a lot of people talking about Gurriel. And I feel like Garver is like
crossing guys off my list right now.
Right. I feel like Garver is pretty close to that tier. I don't think he's in that tier because he hasn't played a whole lot. Obviously injuries, and he only played like 78 games this year, I think. And you're getting him for the bat. He should probably be a DH. Though he can fake it behind the plate every now and then. We talked about him yesterday on the Patreon actually, and you said that he's probably like slightly worse than Tom Murphy behind the plate. But if you already have Zavala on the roster and Garver's kind of like emergency third catcher, but mostly your full-time DH.
Yeah, play some first base too.
Lefty destroyer with a 170 WRC plus this past year. And he also smoked righties to the tune of 127 WRC plus. So good against both sides. Yeah, another strong option for the full-time DH. Again, I really think that it's important that the Mariners get a full-time DH because I'm not confident enough in their ability to build enough depth, or not even their ability, just their willingness to build out enough depth to justify rotating guys to the DH, because that's been really my biggest hang up with some of the Dipoto roster builds is just Dipoto and company have relied a lot on a lot of things going right for them towards the back end of their roster and with the position players. And I feel like they're probably going to do that again with question marks like Dylan Moore and Dom Canzone.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Speaking of question marks, I kind of like the idea of Michael A. Taylor as your fourth outfielder.
I almost put him on my list.
Yeah.
Like
elite defensive outfielder at any spot. You can play him in all three spots and he will be double plus there. Coming off somewhat of a career year, he did hit a career high 21 home runs with the Twins. Surprise, guy goes to the Twins and he hits home runs. There are strikeout concerns here. There's no denying that. He's not a big on base guy either. Again, this is a role player, not a guy that in theory you're starting every day. 33% strikeout rate though was kind of outside the norm of what it's been the last 3 years, but he's always been a strikeout guy. Walks are below league average. So again, this is a guy, he's up there, he's hacking, but he is again plus defender, plus base runner, crushed lefties last year, has power, gives you a legitimate option in left field, gives you a legitimate platoon partner with either Kelnick or Canzone, if that's the route you want to go. Last year against lefties, he hit 252, 313, 602. Again, elite defense, great guy to have coming off your bench, crushes left-handed pitching, has power. It's a little bit like Duvall, but it's much better defense and much better base running value. So yeah, as a fourth outfielder, as a guy coming in, like, to spell Kelnick or hopefully like a Rosarena or Rodriguez, 2 or 3 times a week, and then finding him an at bat or a start at the DH against a tough lefty. I like Michael A. Taylor as a fit on this ball club, and I think he fits the roster pretty well.
It's a good call. It's a good call. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen as we break down some under the radar free agent targets for the Mariners. You just mentioned Michael A. Taylor in the outfield. I'm going to throw out Randall Grichuk. He got his career back on track with the Rockies this past year, and while he benefited greatly from hitting at Coors Field, he actually finished the year pretty strong as an Angel. 115 WRC plus in the month of September. Solid fourth outfield option, can rotate through the DH spot depending on matchups. He's depth.
there's a lot of guys like that. One of the guys on my list is Eddie Rosario, who is just kind of the textbook definition of a league average bat. In fact, he had a 100 WRC plus on the nose this year. Not a big on base guy. Kind of some platoon issues, but doesn't walk a ton, doesn't strike out a ton. He's a hacker. He's up there swinging the bat. And you look at, throughout his career, he's a career 102 WRC plus. That's kind of greatly weighed down by the 62 WRC plus he threw up in 2022. Got back on track, 268, 305, 460. It's 20 home run pop. Not a great defender, or I should say not a good defender. You could put him in left, for a couple times a week if you need to, and he's going to get DH at bats. That's kind of where you see his role, but it's left-handed pull power. It's a guy who's 32 years old, has been pretty much league average his entire career. And it's, a guy that's probably going to get $5-6 million bucks. So, as a, kind of a fifth outfield / DH type, mostly against right-handed pitching. I like Eddie Rosario at 32 years old.
Yeah, I'll also just kind of throw Robbie Grossman into the mix, switch hitting outfielder, solid fourth outfield option again. Very good against lefties this past year, 158 WRC plus, but of course you're going to be facing righties more often than not. So
yeah,
it's a valuable asset, but not a super valuable one. But yeah, if they got Robbie Grossman, cool, that's fine. I also want to talk about a pitcher real quick, Colin McHugh. He'll have to check out medically. Ended the season with right shoulder inflammation, which is obviously a pretty big red flag, especially at 36 years old. He's going to be turning 37 in June next year as well. But on the chance that he's good to go, I've liked McHugh a lot in years past. I've really wanted the Mariners to get him or get someone that can fill a similar role that he does. And he's just a season removed from being basically elite in almost every category on Baseball Savant. Like, it's red. Like, the whole page is red. He hardly walks anyone, has posted high strikeout rates, doesn't throw hard, but he creates a lot of deception with his pitches. Disgusting slider. He's pretty sick when he's on his game, and he can be deployed in a ton of different ways, or at least he has, right? Who knows how much this injury is going to impact him, but he's gone multiple innings in the past. He can throw high leverage innings. You can do a lot of different things with McHugh. He's a very versatile reliever to have in your bullpen. He would make this bullpen, in my mind, significantly better as long as, everything checks out medically, which is, again, a big if.
Right. In terms of pitchers, there's, quite a few guys that make some sense here. I'm kind of interested in the idea of, if you just want to round out the back end, like let's say you don't get Yamamoto or Snell or anything, you just kind of want to round out the back end. I think Hyjin Ryu is kind of an interesting name. He's just standard number 5 star, a little bit better than Marco. But it might be too similar to Marco for that to be in play. How about Alex Wood? Just a solid arm coming off of injury himself. He kind of went back and forth between the bullpen and the rotation last year, but that's actually kind of a selling point for the Mariners. A guy who can kind of, swing that way. Just kind of a solid 2-win pitcher type. Spencer Turnbull, if you're taking a lottery ticket, is a guy that I've, heard is on the Mariners radar. And then obviously there's Jacob Junis is a fun guy, big curveball or big slider. Good fastball, has experience starting, really pitched well out of the Giants bullpen last year. And then, a couple of the guys coming off of injuries or still being injured. You look at Tyler Mahle as kind of a stash. I think that's a fun idea. And then also Frankie Montas, who did actually get back at the end of last year. He did throw, I think, 2 innings for the Yankees coming back from his shoulder injury. We know the Mariners were interested in him 2 deadlines ago. And ultimately they pivoted to Luis Castillo, and thank goodness they did, because we probably are still in a playoff drought if they didn't. So, those just some bulk names there. But yeah, I do have a couple other bats to throw out there. You got anybody else on your list?
I have one last guy on my list, Brandon Woodruff. Talked about him a little bit. You've thrown that idea out. I'm surprised he wasn't on your list. He's not going to pitch this year, so the idea would be to sign him to a 2-year deal and pay him like, $1 million or so to commit to pitching for you in 2025, at a dollar figure that's more reflective of his capabilities. You get him in your organization, oversee his rehab, all that, and you would get rewarded with a guy who's been a pretty damn good number 2 starter. At least that's the hope. So like the Woodruff idea, I would consider him under the radar because he's hurt, right? He's not going to pitch this year. So, I don't see a lot of people talking about him. But I think that's, we've seen this in the past. The Mariners did this on a much lower end with Ken Giles, where they gave him a 2-year deal. He wasn't going to pitch the first year of that deal. We've seen was it the Red Sox or was it the Padres who did that with Garrett Richards, and it worked out pretty well for them.
I think it was the Padres.
Yeah. So this has been done before, and there's been some mixed results on those deals. Obviously Ken Giles didn't work out for the Mariners, but Woodruff is obviously a more high-end talent than some of the guys that have had to do this, that have had to take deals like this. So
we'll see. Couple more names just to throw out there. Hunter Renfroe. Yeah. He's basically late stage Mitch Haniger, minus the injuries. He's going to hit about 250. He's going to put up about a 310, 315 on base, and he's going to, hit a lot of home runs. He's going to slug, and he's probably going to be fringe average in right field. He's got a strong arm. Like, there's a lot of Mitch Haniger qualities here. He was not good last year, but it's tough to blame anybody who goes to Anaheim when they're not good. I mean, who would be? Except for Shohei Ohtani, and he's a freak, and Mike Trout, who's also a freak. So yeah, but again, it's you're probably looking at 250, 310, 480, somewhere in that range for a triple slash. He's fine defensively, and he's probably just a 1-year deal type of guy. There are some concerns about how he plays in a clubhouse, but again, it's 1 year of a guy. And if it's really that big of a concern, like if it gets to a point where you just can't handle it, you just DFA him, and it's not a huge deal. This is why he's played on 5 teams in the last 4 years, but at least that's the theory. We don't know for sure, but I do think he plays just the power is legitimate, even from the right side at T-Mobile Park, that the power would be fine. So Renfroe, again, probably like a 1 year, $6 million deal. Actually doesn't have a big issue walking, and he doesn't strike out a ton. He's not an elite walk guy. He's fringe average most years, but no, the strikeout rate the last 3 years has been right at around 23%. So puts the ball in play, takes some walks, hits some home runs. Renfroe's an interesting guy to put. Ideally, he hits like 6 or 7 for you. And then the last one here is the name that I think we're in agreement on, Michael Brantley. Who, some injury concerns the last 2 years. He's 37. He's getting up there. There are some legitimate, worries about him. And yet, despite all that, just in 2022, his last year where he was fully healthy for any stretch of a season, he hit 288, 370, 416. His career 298, 355, 439 hitter. Doesn't strike out, draws walks, not a ton of pop, but he will hit doubles. He's kind of a line drive guy, uses the whole field. You can put him in left field once or twice a week, but he's a primary DH, and that's kind of the fit there. And fun little note, he was born in Bellevue. His dad was a former Mariners center fielder. So, if you care about that type of stuff, there's that. But Brantley, I think, is if you could guarantee me 120 games of Michael Brantley, he would be much higher on my list, because I just think that the profile, like his batted ball profile and all that, I think it works really well at T-Mobile. I just, he's 37 years old and he hasn't been healthy at all the last 2 years. So red flag, but I'm interested as like, if he's the third best bat you bring in, like if you bring in a Rosarena and then you go out and you get, I don't know, Gurriel or Harold Ramirez, whatever, doesn't matter. Like if Brantley's kind of the finishing move for the offense, I like that quite a bit.
Yep. Totally. All right. So I think that's going to do it for our show. Remember to answer the question of the day down below or in the live chat here if you're watching the premiere. Best MLB ballpark outside of T-Mobile Park. You do not pick Mariners Ballpark. So which one outside of that do you like the most? Doesn't have to be one that you went to either. I mean, my answer was a ballpark that I've never gone to. Would love to go there one day, though.
Mhm.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dan Gonzalez, that's CANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day. We'll see you next time. Peace.